Hey everyone, welcome to the video. I greatly appreciate you tuning in and taking a peek. This weekend actually marked the 1-year anniversary of me starting to play guitar, so I thought it was a pretty cool thing. So always aspired to play guitar all the way through my life, and for me to do it at 40 years old was definitely a cool thing. You can teach an old dog new tricks, but anyway, I thought it'd be cool to kind of go through some of the things that I've learned this year. Wish I had known in the beginning or had insight on. Hopefully that will help some other beginners out there who are looking for information on the web or otherwise. You know, I think it's tough when you're starting out because you really are so naive, and it's hard to kind of pull in information and understand what's credible and what isn't. Still struggle with that sometimes today, but you know, this is kind of a video just to kind of dive into you know, some of the things along the way that you really want to pay attention to. You know, I'll talk about gear, I'll talk about a little bit of music, guitar theory, some online resources that you can kind of tap into and that have really helped me, and some of the best ones out there. And then stay tuned for the end, because I'll actually talk about some of the most important habits that I've kind of developed over time, and I think it really helped me progress as I've gone along. So, you know, big thing obviously when you start out is trying to figure out what in the world you can play, whether it be an acoustic or an electric. And obviously there's so much out there as far as availability of what you can buy. I will say, you know, the type of guitar that you buy, obviously a nicer guitar, it's beneficial later in your journey, in my opinion. I really think if it's, you know, the cost of a guitar is going to inhibit somebody from starting to play, don't fall into that trap. Any guitar, you know, down to even toy guitars can teach you something. I would say a standard acoustic guitar is probably a great place to start. You can get acoustic guitars online now for, you know, as little as $100 or so. Probably get a used one from a pawn shop for, you know, less than $100. So, but that you just want to start. You want to start playing, and acoustic is a great place to start. It really does simplify, you know, what you have to do with technique. And obviously, when you're starting your journey, you're really just trying to learn how to play, how to finger or fret notes. You know, how to create shapes, chord shapes with your hands. So an acoustic is just such a great place to start. It really does, you know, an acoustic really does help you build hand strength a lot quicker. Your calluses are going to build up a lot quicker as well because of the gauge of the string and the amount of hand strength that it requires. So obviously there's a caveat to that, because there are some parts of your journey, if you stick to an acoustic only, it will inhibit some technique development until the physical development of your hands, your hand strength becomes better. But it's really, really great for rhythm playing. Obviously, it really is going to teach you percussion technique, which is just that's really something I love with acoustic, and really it's something that I really enjoy in the guitar playing, that specific, just making percussion sounds and, you know, the backbeats and all of those things. It's just really well done on the acoustic, obviously, and those skill sets really translate over. Now, the other thing I would say is, if you're stuck on one guitar or the other, and maybe you decide to start with an electric, which is perfectly fine, you know, understand each category of guitar, be it acoustic or electric, they teach you different things, be it physically as well as you know, with technique. They're completely different things, but they really do complement each other. And you know, it's funny, the times that I've focused on acoustic or electric and gone back to the other after some time had passed, I catapulted forward. You really do, you realize how much of these things you don't pay attention to, or maybe you weren't focused on, how that really does translate to your ultimate skill set, which is playing the guitar. So if you you know, an acoustic, obviously the physical adaptability, the hand strength, all of those things, rhythm playing tends to be a little more conducive to learning on an acoustic, simply because, you know, acoustic percussion and all those things that I mentioned, a little more prevalent. Now, the electric obviously does require you to buy an amplifier, so you have to have a way to power the electric guitar and produce that sound. So it's a little more entry as far as equipment. Obviously, electric tends to cost a little bit more in a lot of cases, you know, baseline compared to what the acoustic entry level is. But I will say, you know, an electric, I got my electric within, I think after about 3 months of playing, and it really taught me a lot about guitar that I didn't think I wanted to learn, because I approached guitar with the want to learn acoustic, and I really didn't care about electric. I didn't know enough about it, and really didn't, at the time, didn't really appeal to me, believe it or not. Electric, when I started picking that up, it really taught me finger independence and dexterity. And I really hadn't really acquired that yet with the acoustic. And part of that was just because it's so hard to push down the gauge of strings in the acoustic. You really will have to develop into that kind of hand strength where you can consistently get a clean sound and all of those things that go along with it. But the electric allowed me to move around in the guitar a little bit. So I started to learn scales. I introduced playing single note lines, getting into riffs a little bit. So that finger independence and dexterity really becomes a bigger thing when you start playing electric because of that. Now, I also started the skill set of hammer-on pull-offs. That really became easier to approach because it just takes that much more hand strength to do a hammer-on or even pull-off. When it takes a lot more just pure strength to make the string resonate cleanly on an acoustic, where those things are really readily available to you on an electric, and it's a lot easier to learn. It doesn't hurt your hands near as much either. The thing about that is, in learning rhythm on an electric, I will say that at first, electric is a lot harder to play rhythm guitar on, and that's simply because there's techniques that you don't necessarily have to use in a large degree when you're playing rhythm on an acoustic. When you add that electric factor into it, you get some real feedback. So you get immediate feedback from your audio equipment, whether it be allowing your strings to ring out with an electric, which obviously creates a muddied, distorted sound that's not desirable. It's not something you're trying to acquire. So electric is really a lot harder to me to learn rhythm guitar initially, because you don't have that kind of touch. You really need touch to play electric effectively for rhythm. So I would say, if you're going to learn rhythm playing and that's what interests you initially, I would highly recommend an acoustic. Obviously, plenty of people learn on electric, and that's completely fine, but you will struggle a little bit with dynamics, getting a clean sound. The other caveat to that is electric, for the physical point, it's obviously a lot easier on your hands. So you're not going to build calluses up as quickly. There's parts of my journey, like when I started learning bar chords, having that electric was very handy, because the hand strength required on an acoustic is significantly different than what you're going to need on an electric to learn that. So that was more approachable having that. It's definitely taken me more time to play bar chords effectively on an acoustic. There's plus and minuses to each. Obviously, with an electric, having that amp and having dialing into like reverb and some of the basic effects like chorus, overdrive, those distortion effects, that's a cool thing to dive into, and it really does open up another segment of your journey. And it's honestly where the rabbit hole for gear started with me, and still continues to this day. It's a love-hate relationship. My wife hates it, I love it. But you really start dialing into differences in gear. Electric, it applies a lot to, because you start to understand how things connect together, how you make these certain guitar effects. So if you're playing electric, or even an acoustic, at some part in your journey when you start to get comfortable, and I picked this up probably about 6 months, I'd say 5 or 6 months in, I started to dial into guitar effects processors or pedals. And you can do either or. Honestly, if you're starting out and you're budget friendly, you probably want to go with a guitar effects pedal. And this is just like a multi-effects pedal. They make them you can get them as little as, I think, 150 bucks, maybe even less on sale. But I think I bought my first one with Sweetwater. It had a looper on it, which is another thing I'll mention, but we'll get into that in a second. But it has looping. It had looping, and then it had a lot of preset effects like your basic rock overdrive, you know, Zeppelin sounds, basically just a lot of different types of sounds, where when you're entering at a beginner level, these types of presets, as opposed to you trying to chain together a pedal board, it's so much easier to approach. It really gave me like 50 presets of various types of sounds, whether it be all the way from clean to distorted type sounds. So it literally lets you dive into that avenue, which is, it really opens up a whole different thing for you, where you start to you know, manipulate sound, and you start to dial into how to control all these effects, what order they go in on the pedal board. All those things are stuff that comes later, but it is part of your it's part of your toolkit that you want to learn. And it's not something you want to avoid. You really want to dive into the effects, and you'll start to understand, because one of the more frustrating things in the beginning without the effects pedal is that replicating songs that you know and want to play, even if you can play them right without that effects pedal, on a lot of these songs, especially rock electric bass, even acoustic, you know, without reverb, delay, some of those effects, you don't get the sound that you're used to hearing, and it takes away some of the glamour of it. So it's definitely something you want to dive into at some point. You want to dial in you're just being able to play your open chords and rhythm in time. Another piece of gear that you really want to get right from the beginning, and you're going to hate using it, but it will help you tremendously, is a metronome. And you're going to hear this from people. It is a very monotonous thing to have, but having a click track, having a metronome in some fashion is really, it's one of those gauges that you have to kind of get dedicated to, and you got to dedicate using it. You will have no semblance of time and rhythm until you start using one consistently. You really have to learn to play along with something that can keep time indefinitely, and the metronome being that thing. I mean, the other thing you can do, and I did, and I have used in my toolkit, is playing along with the actual recording, and learning it that way. So kind of taking a side note, and just rhythm playing as a quick tip. Something that really helped me, and when I understood this with rhythm playing, the metronome helps in keeping time, but finding songs that you know inside and out, that maybe you've heard for 10, 15 years, or a song that you just know really well, you can sing it in your head in time. That's a cool place to start without diving into the metronome and getting mechanical with it. But learning rhythm playing that way, where you can hear and you know what it's supposed to sound like, you know the lyrics, and you can sing along with it in time, it really helps your rhythm playing. When I started playing rhythm, one of the hardest things for me was learning patterns. And when you start to realize that those patterns are really there as a guideline to help you kind of imagine it in your mind's ear, what you understand later is that you'll start to be able to pick up on these patterns audibly, because you're used to hearing them. And it's not about remembering a pattern as much as it is remembering the flow of rhythm. You get in that, you know, you'll hear people talk about the groove. That groove is something that innately makes that song what it is. And you'll start to kind of dial in and get connected with that. The way I did that personally in my journey was really, the metronome helped in some regards, knowing that tempo. Something I did religiously, and this will kind of be one of those sneak peek habits, learning to tap your foot. And when I say your foot, getting used to using your non-dominant foot, the foot that your guitar is not going to sit on when you're sitting, learning how to do that, like when you're driving in a car, for example, tapping along with music that you know, and learning and feeling that rhythm and that beat, and letting your foot get used to tapping with a song. That is a habit you want to start right away. I've been doing it since day one, and it really, really made a massive difference in my ability to recognize patterns, get in tune with music in a way that I really hadn't experienced before. And that really helps catapult your rhythm playing. So that's really one of those habits I highly recommend. I'll go over some others here in a little bit, but you know, metronome's definitely a tool you want to use. I started using a metronome when I started using learning scales. Learning scales when you're trying to learn single note lines. The metronome is a really good tool to really gauge how fast you're able to play, playing those lines in time. Because what a lot of people will do when they start learning guitar, especially if you're kind of geared towards electric guitar, I think a lot of people try to dive in and they start wanting to learn riffs. And that's a great place to start because, you know, riffs are things that you hear and they're just catches. That's the hook of the song. If you can play that, it feels like you're playing music. The problem I see with it initially is playing in time, especially with lead lines, is much harder to learn. And so until you can kind of create that sense of rhythm and flow, the flow of the groove, it's a really hard thing to tackle. Metronome's a great tool when it comes to lead lines because tracking that time becomes really imperative when you're trying to learn those lines, and keeping time and trying to learn how to hit single notes, learning a scale within a key, whatever the case may be. That's something you've got to really track, and the metronome is just a great way to keep you in rhythm, in time, while you're learning those scales. So acoustic and electric, obviously, the metronome's one of those things. Getting a tuner, a headstock tuner, either that, you know, is portable, or I bought one later that I bought on Amazon. I think it was, you know, it might have been a little more. It was like 20 bucks, but it actually has a metronome and the tuner. It has a plug-in, so it's a little more accurate. It can gauge the sense, the sound quality down to a better factor, as opposed to the headstock tuners tend to be delayed. They're not always the most accurate thing depending on what you're getting. So maybe invest a little bit of money up front. You can spend an extra 10 bucks, get a metronome, and in that actually have a headphone jack for the metronome if you want to isolate the sound. That's something you want to get right off the bat, though, because it helps you tune the guitar and know where you're at. And one of the habits I have that relating to practice is related to that as well in the tuners. Another thing that and also the guitar processor effect boards, a lot of those have a tuner. Getting a poly, if you have an acoustic electric or the electric guitar, getting a poly tune pedal at some point, it's a good investment. You can plug in your guitar electrically, and it's very accurate to tune your guitar. It shows you, you know, they tend to have better screens on them, so you can really see where you're at and dial in the tuning. A guitar interface is another thing that you may not tackle in the beginning, but it does go into one of the habits that I would recommend building upon. But a guitar interface allows you to kind of record, so you can either plug in an electric acoustic that, you know, they can be adapted, plugged in by guitar jack or an instrument panel. But you can hook them up to, the first one I could hook up to an iPad or a computer by USB, and I think it might have been about $100. It was made for, I think it was like one of those iOS rig type. It had a single jack plugged into a single USB, but it allows you to interface and record yourself. Recording is really, really important. Whether you aspire to sing, perform, or you're just going to do, you know, you're going to play only for yourself, the only real way to get feedback without somebody else listening to you is to record yourself and record your progress. And this is something I did not do in the beginning. I actually I started recording. I recorded little progress tidbits along the way. Maybe did it, you know, maybe a couple times a month. But something I've really gotten into my practice is recording myself. Guitar interface is a really cool investment. There's interfaces too. If you don't have an electric guitar, you can hook up microphones to them as well. Obviously, your cost starts to get more when you do that. So guitar interface is not something you have to have initially. You can actually just take your iPhone, prop it up. The sound quality is not going to be all that great, but it does give you a gauge and help you track your progress. The guitar interface in itself will give you a higher quality sound. If you ever want to get into actually recording yourself play a song and link video up and all those things, you're going to need a guitar interface at some point. So those are pieces of gear that really were really, pivotal things for various reasons that I mentioned. Obviously, guitar picks is something else we can talk about real quick. It's a rabbit hole that you can go through. There's all these opinions as to what you need, what you want to use for different types of playing. What I will say in the beginning, listen to the advice when it comes to using a thin pick when you're starting rhythm playing, whether it be electric or acoustic, simply because you don't have the touch. You're going to be very tense playing, and just the simple fact that you're very rigid, that thin pick is going to help and be very forgiving. I didn't listen to that advice initially, used a thicker pick on my acoustic, and it sounded awful. And I've learned to try to take that advice and kind of work my way back up to a thicker pick now that I've been playing and have a little more touch and feel. I will say as a caveat, if you're using and you're learning for lead lines, that thin pick is going to want to be replaced in the beginning, probably with a medium to heavy pick, only simply because those lead lines, electric playing, it's a little more conducive to having a little heavier gauge pick to get the kind of sound that you want. Rhythm playing, because of the constant back and forth, the tension, the lack of flexibility in your wrists, your hands, all of those things that play into it in the beginning, you're going to have to use a thinner pick and get used to that. And you kind of graduate up. As far as playing now, I mean, the acoustic, I would say use something that is, a lot of people will use anything from like a 60 millimeter up to like an 80, 85. I tend to top off about 85, unless I'm playing like flat picking, playing a lot of single notes. If I'm rhythm playing, I'm sticking for something, 0.85 millimeters or below. The good range is about 50 to 85, depending on how much give you want in the pick. A great thin pick, I think, is around 50 millimeters. You can find some that are a little flimsier than that. I think it becomes paper thin at that point, becomes a little less motivating because of the sound quality. But picks definitely make a difference. What you're comfortable with, I would recommend buying a bunch of variety packs. I use Dunlop for a lot of stuff. I just bought Acoustic Attack picks as well. That's actually pretty, they have a lot of interesting picks that are not out there they're actually very comfortable to play, and they seem high quality that I just got. But Dunlop tends to be the go-to for me. So there's a lot of different series out there, little grip styles, big picks, small picks. Find what you like form factor wise, and that can be adapted to any thickness typically. And the types of playing that you're going to want to have a variety, because the types of playing, the types of songs that you're playing, the types of technique, those all matter in the pick that you're going to use. And I didn't realize that in the beginning, but it does make a difference, especially when you get a little more control of your playing. In the beginning though, rhythm playing is what you're going to be doing most of the time, probably, unless you're really diving into riffs and lead playing. Stick to something that's under 60 millimeters for your rhythm playing. Like I said, you might want to get into 1 millimeter or so for your electric playing, riffs, that type of thing. But that's really makes a difference. It does. It makes a difference in your sound until you can get control over your dynamics. When you start playing initially, you just play so damn hard because you're just trying so hard to play in time, to actually make your fingers do what they want or what you want it to do, to sound audibly like music. Is just your focus, and your dynamics, your sound, even your rhythm. And a lot of times it's just so rigid. It's so stuck in stone, and you really it really does help you to have a thin gauge pick. It really does help you get that touch and feel, and then as you get that touch and feel, you can kind of graduate from that. But some things I would really I'm gonna dive into some of the guitar theory that I really hope people take take my advice, and you're really going to want to learn this stuff right off the bat. It really helps immensely in understanding the guitar and learning where stuff comes from and how to apply that is so much more important than learning, let me learn this riff from this song, or let me learn this song and you tell me it's a C chord, so it's a C chord. Learning how to break that stuff down, especially as you get further along, it really makes a massive difference in understanding how to make things fit together, how to make your playing sound a lot more interesting. learning how to apply those lead lines from songs to your own type of creativity and creating your own lead lines. All those things really, you have to have a base level knowledge of music theory. Music theory can be very involved, but it's at its simplest form. I think it is important to understand scales, and there's so many different types of scales out there. Don't dive into all these complicated scales and modes and all these things. I'm still learning a lot of that stuff, and a lot of it's interesting, and it is cool to understand where those types of sounds come from. I'd say the big things that are important is your major and minor scales are important. I would say the major scale is probably one of the most important. I honestly learned G major, and learning that shape and extensions from that, what you'll learn is you can apply that to any key. So learning the major scale is very important. I think it's, again, if I had to do it in a perfect situation, I think learning on the electric is better for that, just because it does lend itself to be a little kinder. Your lead lines, those single note type of lines, are easier to play on an electric. But something I would recommend in the beginning, or at least in the first probably 3 months or so, I would learn your major scales. Learning your minor pentatonic and major pentatonic scales is also a massively important thing to understand the shapes. I think understanding how to apply the shapes to any key probably comes later, but just learning the standard A minor, at your 5th fret, that 5th position, your minor pentatonic scale, learning those notes and all the extensions of that and how it applies to your open chords, or the open position, the open notes, and learning the open pentatonic too. That's just immensely valuable in your playing. Especially, you want to mix in lead guitar playing with your rhythm playing, getting into technique where it's a lot more, it's more advanced sounding, it's a little more nuanced. Understanding those scales and knowing how to play those comfortably, that's just really important stuff. Also, when you're learning those scales, learning where the chord shapes, so you would apply it to your open chords initially, learning your chord shapes and what, your open chords, those triads, learning those sounds, what makes up those sounds and why they sound the way they do, and also learning your major and minor. Why do your major and minor chords sound the way they do? Knowing why and the differences between those, that's something you really want to dive into. Learning how chord shapes fall into the notes of the scale and the intervals kind of fall into that chord shape. And if you're a beginner now and you're watching this and you're going, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, and I'm not going to worry about it, you will. And just learn it and take it in slowly over time. And I promise you, 6 months of learning these things, intervals was probably one of the biggest things with music theory that I avoided initially and then dove into later, and it made the guitar fretboard, which seemed insurmountable to learn at that point, it really opened it up and helped me understand how things connect. I think I think that diving into those things, learning the different keys, what makes up a key, learning circle of fifths along the way as well. So learning your keys and which chords go into those keys and why those intervals make up to that. The Nashville number system is another thing you want to learn. Naming, when somebody talks about a 1 chord or a 4 chord or a 5 chord, what does that mean? And how do you identify? Nashville number system is another, just an important thing to understand when you're watching a lot of content, you're watching videos. It's gonna be it's just a good thing to be able to understand the terminology that people are communicating, and you start to understand how sounds relate to each other in that key, which is something you really want to pay attention to, because when I didn't think I would initially, but now that I've played the guitar enough to kind of understand some of these things, it's cool how certain chord progressions not only be heard through thousands of songs, but the way those are played the nuances with those, that's what makes music, and understanding how all that stuff fits together and how people manipulate that simple structure to really apply to what they want. It's a cool thing, and it's something when you start playing on your own and you play your own songs or you play your own types of ideas, it's something you really want to understand how to do. So I mean, all of these things, they really add up to understanding the fretboard. And you know, you might want to, you might ask yourself, well, I just want to be able to play guitar, and I really don't care about unlocking the fretboard or whatever that means. Think about, I don't know, think about taking a trip across country. You want to have a roadmap and an understanding of where you're going. And that's really what it comes down to when you're talking about unlocking the fretboard. People are just telling you, understand how the fretboard is set up and how do you navigate across it. And so that's really what this is. It's setting that roadmap out, understanding why those roads are built the way they are, how do they interconnect, and how do they relate to each other. And ultimately you get to the destination. The destination is understanding your guitar and how do you create sounds from that, you know, and basically you allow the instrument to do the things that you tell it to do, and you know how to find your way. And you discover, I think John Mayer, one of his interviews, he was talking about guitar theory, and you know, I think he obviously knows a lot more about guitar than the rest of us mortals. But a lot of his knowledge is, I guess it's misconstrued. A lot of his, you know, obviously he did go, I think he went to 1 year of Berkeley and then dropped out because it wasn't a fit for what he wanted to do. But, you know, he talks about the guitar and like kind of in your mind, not even knowing like you know, it's this mode or whatever, you start to really break the guitar into like neighborhoods, and you're like, well, I've been to this neighborhood, and you know I can make this neighborhood sound like this, and it's kind of a cool way to think about the guitar. But really you find yourself doing that, and that's looking at the guitar fretboard in its entirety across, you know, 20 some frets. If you have an electric and you're trying to dive into that and understand it, it seems overwhelming. What you start to realize is patterns, and you start to understand those patterns. Understanding patterns on the guitar fretboard is immensely important to play the guitar. If you ever want to break out of open position, start playing in different places on the guitar, which opens up your ability to play, you know, an infinite number of sounds. And it's something you're going to want to do if you're going to continue playing guitar. And a lot of people get stuck in that open position where they're playing cowboy chords, and you know what, it may fit what you want. You may just want to be able to sit around a campfire and play for some friends, and if that's what you aspire to do, that's completely fine. If you kind of want to open up the avenue of creativity and the ability to produce, you know, a multitude of different sounds, progressions, etc., it's really necessary to learn the guitar and learn how to navigate around intervals, and you know, learning intervals, and then also understanding how major and minor chords are created. Having that and learning how those things relate really helps unlock those neighborhoods across the fretboard. I highly recommend you dive into that stuff, because it's going to become a valuable tool to you when you start to try to learn past the open position and you start to try to dive in. Now, something that catapults you into that with an electric, power chords are something that well, I didn't pick it up until I started playing electric guitar, because that sound is kind of iconic. That rock, you know, that rock sound that is so iconic on the electric guitar. You tend to play on that electric, you tend to move around, but what a power chord does is it's easy shape in the beginning that your fingers can really adapt to. It really only requires, you break it down, it really only requires the root note in its fifth, so you can really make it to even a one finger power chord, depending on where you're playing. But as you start to move around on the guitar, two fretted notes is all that's really required. And so you learn how to move around on the fretboard. You learn those bottom two strings, your E and A string, and that starts to understand where the origin, the foundation of the guitar kind of spawns out from in my mind. And then as you start to learn how to move away from that, learning octave shapes and also those major and minor bar chords, and relate that back to that major scale, major and minor scales that we talked about. Being able to connect all of that together is what unlocks that. And you need all of those things, really. In my estimation, people always come up with these little quick hacks and, do this. This is all you got to pay attention to. In reality, I think you need an understanding of all these things at a small level, because all of those things matter when it comes to try to make music, and understanding intervals in relation to, and then also understanding where notes are at. Octave shapes is another thing that the power chord can teach you, because if you look at a power chord, and you can I'll find all kinds of videos on this, but a power chord is got at its core, it's a root and a fifth, but what you have is you have a 3-note power chord, which actually includes the octave as well. And so what that means is the root, its octave, is replicated on a typical bar chord. It's going to be replicated at the bottom of that strum. And so learning octave shapes as it relates to, and you can dive into this with power chords, because you can learn power chords, obviously, all the way down to, technically you can learn power chords all the way down. There's various ways to make those combinations, but as you approach the GB territory where you cross over and the interval becomes different on the guitar, you start learning how to connect those octave shapes together. Connecting octaves is really, really important. It's something with guitar theory. Once you understand intervals, I really recommend diving into and researching it, because those octave shapes tell you where your root notes are at. And when you're playing lead and learning, when you're learning intervals are related to that root note. So if you can learn all the octave shapes, you can learn the root notes and how they relate to other places on the fretboard. It's kind of a mind-blowing thing, but what it allows you to do is kind of reverse engineer the fretboard. Then what you do is as you play and apply that, a lot of that knowledge, it's kind of like when we're talking about that road map, but you don't need a map to drive home, even though you probably needed a map to find your home originally. And so that's kind of the difference. It's applying that knowledge over and over again. The fretboard becomes, you just know that this is an E or this is an A or whatever the case may be, because you've done it so many times that now it's become just habit. So don't learn the fretboard as thinking you have to memorize all the notes across the fretboard, because I thought that in the beginning, and I was like, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to approach that. Learn these little tidbits of guitar theory as they all come together, and learning those shapes and scales, the octave shapes, all that comes together and really it starts to make a lot more sense. And it's fun, because the guitar seems like such an aggravating thing in the beginning. And there's a lot of people that quit in the first month, because it is a very, very hard thing to learn. It's just not a simple thing to learn. Now, there's a ton of people that can play guitar and play it really well, but for every person that tries to play guitar, I guarantee you there's 3 or 4 that quit. And there's a reason for that. There's just a lot of struggle you have to get through. There is a lot of things that you have to learn. So kind of brings me to online resources. I'm going to mention this quickly, but I'm just going to give kudos to people out there that obviously are just tremendously talented, have done a massive amount of work over the years to really bring guitar to us simple mortals who could only hope and aspire to learn it in the past. It used to be a thing that was not approachable. I think I tried to learn it for less than a month in college 20 plus years ago, and it was just too difficult. Couldn't adapt, couldn't do it, couldn't have the discipline to actually play longer than maybe a week or two. The online resources now that are available, be it YouTube, there's obviously a lot of channels out there and dedicated websites to learning, both corporate backed as well as there's a lot of individuals out there that have created something for themselves through this avenue. So I started with Justin Banderco, justinguitar.com. Phenomenal resource, especially for beginners. Now, that's not to say I still listen to a lot of his lessons to this day. Him and and MartyMusic.com, Marty Schwartz. Those are the two prominent ones on YouTube, as well as obviously on the internet. They just do, both of them are phenomenal teachers. I will say Marty is, it tends to be a little more advanced, probably less approachable in the beginning. However, he does, as far as song tutorials, he's just a great resource. Him and Justin, for different reasons, are great resources. Justin Guitar is really great for a beginner. It's a subscription, I believe, still $10 a month. It has an app that accompanies it, which has a ton of songs on it, which can be helpful even for an intermediate player, but especially in the beginning, it gives you a sense of time. If you're trying to learn a song and you're just looking at tabs, or even sheet music, if you can do that, it's, unless you really dial in and you don't, like, I don't know how to read, I can't, sight read music. So I honestly, things as far as applying rhythm and time, that's something that I've had to learn over time from various resources, either listening to the song or, learning and picking that stuff up over time. But he has an app on Just a Guitar that actually allows you to play along even with a vocalist. So it allows you to really get a sense of time, space, some of those things that are really hard to explain unless you experience them. Obviously, his beginning lessons are phenomenal as far as learning chords, embellishments, rhythm playing, lead playing, how to play certain songs. Just phenomenal. He's one of the best resources to this day out there. He's been doing it for 15 years, and I believe, or maybe even more now at this point, but I know 15 plus years for him and Marty. MartyMusic.com. Marty Schwartz is probably the most popular online, if I had to guess, just based on subscriber base. I might be wrong on that, so don't misquote me, but he does phenomenal. Very entertaining, very personable, great resource. Literally any song you can possibly think of, I guarantee you, between the two of them, there's a lesson out there for it. That's pretty incredible. It's a, obviously these guys do it full time. Phenomenal teachers. I have paid for both of them historically. Some of the advanced classes for Marty Music are phenomenal. His lead guitar course absolutely changed the way I approach lead playing and really opened up a door with that. He's great with that stuff. I'm pretty sure he's a pretty big fan of Jimi Hendrix and that type of playing. So mixing, rhythm with lead playing. That's a cool thing that really has opened up since I've been playing both the acoustic and the electric. But both of those guys are great resources. Learning songs, guitar, I think Guitar Zero to Hero, and I'll put all this stuff in the description, but that's a great one for learning songs. Great visual display. There's a lot of good songs on there. It teaches you how to play songs. Is a great resource for that. I use Fender Play some as well. It was good for beginner stages. After the beginning stages, I'm not really sold that it's that great of a resource. Obviously there's a lot of different YouTube personalities out there that have useful content. Sean Daniel's another one I use he's pretty consistent. It's a lighter channel, so it's more entertaining, but there's a lot of little tips that I've picked up from watching his videos, and the videos are entertaining. Like I said, there's a group of them that kind of interrelate. Mary Spender is another one, phenomenal singer-songwriter, getting different perspectives. Rick Beato, his, as far as music theory, like, you won't find I believe he has his doctorate. He's music producer, done it all in music. There's very interesting interviews on his channel as well. Rhett Scholl is another one, phenomenal. I think he plays guitar in a band, but he has a great channel. A lot of good useful information, be it like, it can be anything from gear to how to travel with the guitar, tips for playing, etc. It's good to get different personalities, different insights. There's different channels for different things too, so I think that's a cool thing. There's obviously, like, that's kind of my idea for doing this channel. Different, just because the information's out there, the way people relate to it, it's all different. All these channels provides a different perspective and ultimately the community is very universal from what I see. So it's a cool thing, getting different perspectives, different insights. Sometimes people say things a different way. Same piece of information, they say it a different way. It makes more sense. So all those things matter. Repetition matters too. But all those are great online resources. Ultimate Tabs, obviously, good. Ultimate Guitar Tabs, great resource. It kind of leads me to the last topic. So if you stayed around for this entire video, greatly appreciate it. If you like the content, feel free, please hit the subscribe button. I greatly appreciate it. Just trying to grow this channel so that it reaches enough people, and people get some insight. It circulates a little bit more. So all that support's appreciated. If you like the video, hate it, whatever, put it in the comments and let me know, and I can take the feedback and move that on to something a little more useful to everybody. But moves me to the last part. I think it's the most useful to beginners, and it's anytime you pick up playing or doing anything, a new habit, forming that habit is one of the most difficult things the human brain can really tackle. It's such a hard thing, and as you become older, what amazes me about people that pick up things later in life is, I can promise you, you just don't learn, you don't pick up things as quickly. There's not as the ability to grow and adapt like there used to be with somebody that may be 20 or less. It just you don't have the ability to learn. You're less receptive to it. Physically, when you apply that to the guitar, there's a lot of physical adaptation that's just not kind to an older body. But all these things combined, it's definitely something. When you're creating habits for anybody, you've really got to break it down into smaller parts, and you've also got to remember why you want that habit to be. So I think the biggest thing is to identify as being a guitar player. When you start to do that, it takes the fear of that commitment away from you, and you just know that you are a guitar player. Guitar playing is something that's part of your everyday life, and it's something you commit to getting better at. And I've done that from the beginning, but I think a lot of the mentalities, sometimes we forget that you have to identify what you want to be before you can become that thing. And that's something something I would recommend, something I read actually this year that really, it did help on my guitar journey. Atomic Habits by James Clear, great book. If you ever want to learn how the human brain works and how to easy applications of applying guitar or applying habits, learning habits, there's just amazing tidbits that really help break it down. But one of the things in that book is identifying with what you want to be, whether it be healthy, whatever. But in this case, I want to be a guitar player. I want to be a musician. You don't say that I'm learning guitar. You say that I am that thing, and it's something that clicks in the brain that you identify, and you don't accept anything but getting better at that thing and making incorporating it as part of your life. You can't be a guitar player if you don't play the guitar. And so if you commit to that idea, it's a pretty groundbreaking thing, pretty cool thing, honestly. But definitely focus on that. Also, know why you want to play the guitar. Do you want to play and impress your friends? Do you want to learn your favorite songs? What do those songs look like? Those are important things to remember, and that goal is going to change over time. Why I wanted to play initially is completely different than why I play now. And that's the cool thing about guitar and this journey, and it really is a journey. The more you know about guitar, the more rewarding it becomes, and the different avenues that open up. So that's a cool thing. And it could be, teaching other people, or being able to socialize with a group of musicians, or being able to, the reward of being able to play that song you thought was impossible, or a multitude of other things that go on this guitar journey. Obviously it starts out with just, hey, I was able to play in time, changing between two chords for a minute. It's little things like that, but really breaking that down, breaking those goals down into smaller parts, and keeping the bigger goal in mind along the way. It's a really important thing. You have to have short-term accomplishment and achievement. And what I mean by that is, you have to have your eyes set on, like if it's learning bar chords and you just want to be able to play that F bar chord, and you really know that's your goal, and you realize and accept that's going to be a long-term goal, but these are the things each practice session that I'm going to do, and I'm really going to focus on this piece. Knowing that is really, really important. And what you discover is, not only do you get good at those things that you really focus on, it opens up other avenues in your playing. So now that you can learn one bar chord, now you can learn to move that bar chord. Now you can learn to play, different types of bar chords in different positions. It starts to open up and things build upon each other. But breaking it down into smaller pieces, and not getting discouraged with that one piece. I think sometimes it's hard to break it down into smaller goals because we fear that the greater progress would be inhibited. But what you find is the smaller pieces add up to building the foundation. The foundation becomes a house. The house becomes a mansion. The mansion becomes, the estate. It all builds on each other. And it's something that you really have to break it down and understand. That is long-term goals. Short-term goals to get there is here. Having songs that you you like, even if you can't play them today, having a list of songs you want to be able to play, and then breaking those songs down into smaller pieces, that's a really beneficial thing, because a lot of songs will teach you various things, technique. It could teach you how to play certain things, percussion elements on an acoustic guitar, or certain lead lines and or positions on the guitar, whatever the case may be. Songs in their own right break down into certain techniques, hammer-on, pull-offs, whatever it may be, that help you along and allow you to do other things on the guitar. So having songs as part of your routine is a good thing. Playing songs alone is not going to help you progress, though. And I say that because I think it's important to understand that noodling around and practicing are not the same thing. And having intent with both of those things is important. So playing songs is great because it does teach you, it teaches you how to play in a mix. It teaches you how to, like if you play to a drum track, for example, how to play in time, a metronome, how to use different rhythm patterns to replicate the sound that you're trying. But you learn those little parts of the song that become difficult, and those difficult parts, you then create practice routines off of those things. So if a certain song, requires you to do a lot of hammer-on pull-offs, then that innately you have to start practicing hammer-on pull-offs and practicing that in scales, in rhythm with it could be different chord progressions, whatever it may be. That skill set, hammer-on pull-offs, has to be practiced. And so breaking that technique down and knowing you want to practice that, it could be bar chords. So bar chords is kind of a stopgap in a lot of beginner journeys, is learning bar chords, which I have another video on bar chords that I posted if you're interested. But that I'll put a link. But that playing bar chords is another thing. So knowing you're going to practice that and make it part of your practice session. Practice is breaking things down into smaller pieces and getting better at those smaller pieces. Noodling and playing guitar is taking all those pieces and putting them together and playing music. And so a lot of people will stick to playing songs they know, songs they're comfortable with. You will not learn new things from playing old songs, let's put it that way, or playing songs that you're familiar with. You really want to keep pushing how many songs you know, how many songs you learn, because every song provides a unique challenge, whatever that challenge may be. There's so many different things that could happen within a particular song. Keep learning new songs. You really have to aspire to do that, but also breaking it up and intently practicing, but also intently playing. So you want to break up your session into those things. That's necessary to keep moving forward and creating habits. Constant check-ins. So I was talking about the interface. Guitar interface really has helped me check in with myself, check in with my playing. Some of those songs that I played in the beginning, when I started recording, I'll play those songs again for myself and listen back. You know, audibly you get a different perspective listening as a third person watching a video as opposed to yourself playing. What can sound really good to you while you're playing can sound completely awful once you hear it back recording. And it gives you little things that you can then take from your playing that song, that video, and go, I really need to work on, you know, fretting closer to the frets, or my G chord. When I'm transitioning from a G chord to a C chord, I really struggle with that transition to make it sound clear and precise in time. Whatever it may be, you start to really, both video and audio, I think, are important, because taping yourself, you get that visual aspect. You start to see how you're fretting notes. Are you doing anything habit-wise that's inefficient? Do you sound like you have dynamics, or are you just playing the same volume the entire song? Those are things that are really hard to pick up on while you're in the first person view. Once you take a step back, you tend to pick up on a lot of those things. So progress track's really important. If you can get and invest in a guitar interface, and recording into and getting used to using a digital audio workstation, DAW for short, that's really effective. I say recording into a DAW, it's not required. Taking the quality sound and putting it in a DAW is a good thing. You learn, not only you get to see how things align, but it tends to give you that pure sound that sometimes, depending on what you're recording through, like an iPhone mic, obviously you're picking up a lot of other things. It's not designed for music. It doesn't condense the sound to make it sound crisp. It's not really made specifically for a music frequency. You know, interface you're tied directly in, whether you record through a mic or you record, you know, directly line instrument in. You get a direct sound into a recording process that helps you really pick apart your own playing. You have to be honest with yourself in your playing. That one of the reasons I started this channel was to dedicate having to produce, be it covers, playing that I recorded myself, both visually and through the audio source. And I think it's really helped me with my playing, because as I've done this and created videos, I really start to get my own kind of feedback, things I know I need to work on that really weren't prevalent to me until I started doing that. So recording yourself and be it playing your own covers of songs, playing certain techniques, that's so important. And what it really does, it does provide you that feedback loop, which is very necessary to create successful habits over time. The brain wants to see progress, and we'll get discouraged if we don't, and we tend to fall back into the easier habit. The easier habit in this case is to put the guitar down and not play. So that is an instrumental part of your toolkit. Record yourself, you play it, record it through an interface if you can, but get that quality sound, quality video feedback. It's going to give you progress along the way. You pick up on things you don't already know that you need to work on. And then you also get that feedback loop long term where you go, damn, I'm really good compared to what I used to be. And that's a rewarding thing. And it's really good to look back on that. And I still do that. I do that every single week. I look back on old, me playing the same song, 3 months in, 6 months in, now a year in. It's a massive, massive difference. And it really does reward you in your journey. Cataloging that stuff is so useful. It just really, it's phenomenally useful. I know the musician I talked about earlier that has helped me along my journey, he records himself to this day, and he's been playing, since, he was 18 years old. So he's been playing 15, 20 years at this point. Actually, I think he's been playing 20 plus years. So, people record themselves. You want that feedback. You want to be honest with yourself when you're playing, and you want to work on the things that you need to work on. But doing that, recording songs too, it's different than playing songs to yourself. It really forces you to perfect those songs. To play through a full song in time, it's not an easy thing to do. Even a song that you may know the various parts, to do a perfect take of a song through its entirety is a really, really difficult thing to do. And taping that, forcing yourself to do that in one take it's a rewarding thing, frustrating thing at first, but it's definitely something you want to dive into and get used to utilizing, because it makes a massive difference. You know, I would say the last thing I will kind of leave you with is practice frequency. So the biggest thing you can do, and you'll hear this in a multitude of places, but keep your guitar in view. What is in view in your environment and it's easy to access is the things that your habits are built upon. And so having your guitar, like I have, you know, my guitar, my electrics hanging up right behind me. One of my electrics, my studio office downstairs, I've got my guitars hanging up, or they're in a guitar stand in arm's length at all times. And there's a reason for that. Having that accessible, not having to break it out of a case, hook up the equipment, these are all stopgaps. Being able to just plug in and play, that, and knowing that guitar is staring back at you, telling you to play it, because it will. When you see it, you're going to want to play it, and you want to progress. If you put it away, it's easy to ignore it, to stay away from it. So intently practicing, I would say get in the habit of at least practicing and playing the guitar 20 minutes a day. Now, if you want to get better quicker, there's a certain, you know, you have to put more time into it. You know, it is something that takes time. No matter how innately good you are, how young you are, I will tell you that it will take time to sound good on the guitar. And this skill set, it's called a journey for a reason. You're going to get better over time, but you're not going to be a professional sounding amazing in even a year. But the reality is you're going to be able to play songs, you know, play in time. If you put the practice in consistently, you should be able to do that after 2 or 3 months. And that's something, honestly, will feel very rewarding, and you'll get better at that over time. But you've got to put in the time. 20 to 30 minutes a day is something you've got to dedicate, find time for. We all waste time surfing the internet, you know, watching YouTube videos such as this for more than that kind of time. So find the time in your day, carve it out, and dedicate it to it. And you want it to be an uninhibited time. So you want to be time where you can dedicate, you can study, make part of it learning the theory, part of it learning the physical aspect. Make it a habit outside of your playing as well. So get in the habit of reading about guitar and also watching videos on it in your free time. That's not the practice part. The practice part is the physically playing, getting better at technique, diving into those small parts that build into the bigger parts. The other educational pieces, honestly, I've done that. It is part of my life now. I do it every day. I watch videos, trying to pick up tidbits here and there, whether it be reviews on a new equipment or technique, or all these multitude of things that you consistently just try to build upon, understanding, you know, topics better. But that's additional to the practice. The practice needs to be physically 20 or 30 minutes a day. I will say, as a caveat, there are times when you play consistently, you're going to want to take a break, whether it be like a vacation where you maybe you take 2 or 3 days off. That can be healthy, and it could be a good thing that helps you. If you feel yourself getting burnt out and frustrated, it's better to take a day or two off. That being said, I don't say it lightly, because in the beginning, you want to consistently play every day for the first 3 months. Honestly, once you get past that point and you have a good foundation, playing every day is not as crucial, but taking those small breaks when you start to get frustrated on the more advanced or intermediate things, to me, that makes sense and has its place in the toolkit. In the beginning, though, got to create the habit. It's got to become part of life. You got to play it. And you got to want to enjoy playing it. Like, I was awful in the beginning, but I enjoyed knowing that I was learning and progressing. Your progress is going to be so rapid in that first 3 months, that beginner stage. It's really rewarding, and it really helps that feedback loop in the beginning. Now, after that, it becomes a little more gradual, a little less, a little more nuanced. But at the same token, if you're recording yourself and you're getting that feedback loop long term, you'll still be rewarded by that. But you got to play, and you got to want it. Like, playing guitar is fun. It's rewarding. It's become part of who I am at this point as a person. it's just a phenomenal part of life now. It's given me so much back in terms of entertainment, satisfaction, knowing that I could still learn something at this late in life that was insurmountable, in the younger days of life. So it's a cool thing. But whatever your reason may be, got to play it. You got to keep in mind you will get better the time dedicated to it. But understand what your short and long-term goals are and why you want to play guitar. You want to be that guitar player. But I assure you, it is one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in my life, as far as a skill that I've picked up that has rewarded and given back to me more than I could have hoped. So I'm going to continue with these guitar journey videos, hoping to break down some of the things I learned along my way. But I greatly appreciate if you stayed till the end. This video did go pretty long, but it was kind of summating a year's worth of things down into a small bucket, if we can. And if you want me to break down any of these topics into a deeper dive, let me know in the comments. Like I said, subscribe certainly helps me out and helps give me the feedback to make this channel as good as possible. So appreciate it, guys. Have a blessed day. Dive in to some of my other videos. Hope you enjoy the content. Keep coming back for more. Take care.